Hello and welcome. Today we are going to see how we can balance the so-called hard chlorine equation, where we will prepare chlorine from hydrochloric acid, potassium manganate 7 to produce our chlorine gas. So let's have a look at it. So this is our equation. Before balancing it, we want to ensure that at least we balance it easily with less difficulty. And like I had said earlier in the previous videos, that whenever we are balancing such so-called complex equations, try to identify the substance where we have only one element. And in this case, it's chlorine gas or chlorine. So we shall have to ensure that when we are balancing this equation, we balance this chlorine last. So we shall balance potassium, shall balance our manganese, shall balance our oxygen, shall balance our hydrogen first. Then lastly, we shall balance the chlorine. So let us see how we are going to deal with it. So we have potassium, we have our manganese, we have oxygen, we have hydrogen. So we have to ensure that the left hand side of this arrow is equal to the right hand side of that same arrow. So we have the left hand side and the right hand side. So we want to ensure that these elements have equal number of atoms. For example, potassium on the left hand side we have 1, potassium on the right hand side we also have 1. So actually potassium is balanced. It's 1 to 1. When we go to manganese, we have 1 atom, manganese this side we have 1. Manganese it's 1 to 1. It's also balanced. Oxygen we have 4 on the left hand side, 4 oxygen atoms. However, on the right hand side we have 1. So on the right hand side we have 1 oxygen atom. So at least from here we can start balancing our oxygen atoms by ensuring that at least our oxygen on the right hand side is equal to oxygen on the left hand side. So we shall put a 4 on water by introducing 3 more water molecules. So we have an invisible 4 here. So that means we have now 4 oxygen atoms. So let me cross this out. So now we have 4 oxygen atoms. So oxygen is balanced. Then we have hydrogen. This side we have 1, while this side hydrogen now we have 8. If you can see, initially we had 2, but now 2 times 4, which is 8. So hydrogen this side we have 1, hydrogen this side we have 8. So for us to have 8 this side, we can't reduce these ones, but we can increase these ones. So we shall have to introduce more 7 high HCl molecules so that we have 8 HCl molecules. So we shall have 8 hydrogen atoms. So we have 8 now. We no longer have 1, but we have 8. Then lastly, we have the chlorine atoms. So all other elements are balanced, 1 to 1, 4 to 4, 8 to 8. Then now chlorine is left. Chlorine, we have 8 chlorine atoms on the left hand side because of the 8 we introduced, while on the right hand side we have a 1 here and a 2 this side plus a 2 here. So actually chlorine, let me write it here, we have a 1 plus a 2 plus a 2, which is equal to 5, but we need 8. So one thing to note is that here we have 1 plus 2, which is 3. So actually, let me rewrite this. We have a 3 plus a 2. But now these 3 chlorine atoms, the one in manganese and the one in potassium chloride, we don't want to touch them. However, we want to manipulate this last one so that the total becomes 8. So here we have 3, but now we want this 2 to become 5, so that we have 5 plus 3, which is 8. So which fraction can you multiply by 2 to get 5? Obviously that fraction will be 5 over 2, such that we get 3 plus 5, which becomes our 8. So if I come and place here 5 over 2, that means our equation will be balanced. However, we can't balance with fractions, so we are going to ensure that we multiply throughout by this denominator so that we somehow eliminate it. I repeat, we are going to multiply throughout by 2 so that we eliminate this 2, so that we have a whole number instead of a fraction balancing our chlorine gas. So 5/2 times 2 becomes a 5. Now I'm writing the final answers. 4 times 2 becomes an 8. 1 times 2 becomes a 2. 1 times 2 becomes a 2. 8 times 2 becomes 16. And lastly, 1 times 2 becomes a 2. So because it was already balanced with 5/2, multiplying throughout by 2 does not affect the balancing. We can recheck if at all we have the time, but let's do it very fast. So potassium, we have two atoms. On the right hand side, potassium, we have 2 atoms. Manganese, we have 2 atoms. On the right hand side, we also have 2 atoms. Oxygen, we have 2 times 4, which is 8. So oxygen, we have 8. The same this side, if 8 times 1, which is 8. So HCl, actually it's 16. You can pause the video and check, but everything will be balanced. Our chlorine, I think it will also be 16. Let me hope I'm right. So that's all on how we can balance this equation, and here I rewrite it so that you can see clearly the actual values of the balanced equations. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe so that you're always updated whenever I upload new content. Stay safe.